Today, our lecture is of course the comparison between Chinese and Western culture. And the topic of our lecture today is ancient Chinese philosophy. Let's look at part 1. First, there is a very simple question, but not very easy to answer. That is, what is philosophy? Let's look at the picture first. What is philosophy? What does philosophy study? Is it about cosmos, or our life, or our thoughts? What is philosophy about? And let's look. So generally, philosophy is universally defined as the study of wisdom or knowledge. Knowledge or wisdom about what? About the general problems, facts, situations connected with human existence. So from this we know philosophy is about the study of wisdom or knowledge about human existence. And philosophy is a sort of unity. This cosmological unity is the main point in the journey of life as it goes towards eternal realities. And let's look at Chinese philosophy. Chinese philosophy tries to find the meanings in discovering the true self. The true self as part of a bigger scheme. And what about the Western philosophy? The Western philosophy is more individualistic. Trying to find the meaning of life with self at the center. So from these two pages, we can find something common between Chinese philosophy and the Western philosophy. And also we can find the big differences between these two philosophies. Let's look. Let's turn back. We find both of these Chinese philosophy and Western philosophy. They try to find the meaning of life, find the true self. But Chinese philosophy tends to put the single man as part of a bigger scheme. But the Western philosophy tends to put the people at the center. That's the big difference. And let's look at next part. Intellectual leaders and 4 influential schools of philosophy. Let's first look at intellectual leaders. And Chinese philosophy is the intellectual tradition of the Chinese culture from our early recorded history to the present day. We know it almost has 5,000 years history. And let's look about the important figures. We know the main philosophical topics of Chinese philosophy were heavily influenced by the ideas of some important figures, especially these important figures, big men. First one is Lao Tzu. And second one, Kongzi. We can't say Kongzi. His English name is Confucius. And Mengzi, his English name is Mencius. And another man is Mozi. And all of these big guys lived during the second half of the Zhou dynasty. Let's look at this picture. Look at this man, this old man. Who is this man? And if you don't know him, we can look at some more information. This man had a great work, that is Tao Te Ching. I believe everybody here knows who is this man and who. Yes, he is Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu, named Li Er, and he lived from 571 BC to 471 BC, almost 100 years. So we can say he was a long-lived man. But some people said his age was not so sure, but at least he was a long-lived man. And he was the greatest philosopher and thinker in ancient China. And he was the founder of Taoism. And he was honored as the Holy Founder. Holy Founder? The Holy Founder means 教主. And let's look at his work, Tao Te Ching. Tao Te Ching was the first complete philosophical works in Chinese history, and it was translated all over the world in many different languages. And let's look at the next man. This man, maybe you are more familiar. And look, this is the work of this big man, 论语. So the Analects. So I believe almost everybody knows who is this man. That is 孔子. Kongzi, his English name is Confucius. And Kongzi lived from 551 BC to 479 BC. And his given name was Qiu, and his capping name was Dongyi. He lived in the kingdom of Lu, and he was the famous thinker, statesman, educator, and the founder of Confucianism in the spring and the autumn period. It was said that he had over 3,000 students, and among whom there were 72. These 72 were most outstanding, and he was honored as the teacher of all ages. And he had a great name, that is, an ancient sage. The ancient sage, and his work, the Analects, also had a great or profound influence upon the ancient Chinese history. And let's look. Next one. Let's look at these pictures. These pictures are about Confucius' teaching. And from these pictures, we know where Confucius had his classes and how he went on with his classes. And next page. After enjoying all these pictures, we have no doubt why Confucius was respected as the teacher of an ancient sage. And just now we said his words and his teaching were all collected in his work, the Analects. Let's look at the third man. The third man. This man looks more serious. And look at his saying. He had a very famous saying, that is, if you take others' happiness as happiness, they will take yours as happiness too. And if you take others' sorrow as sorrow, they will take your sorrow as theirs. And there is another famous saying, that is, love others' elder as yours. So who is this man? This man is Mengzi, Mencius. Mencius lived from 372 BC to 289 BC. He lived in the warring period. He was the principal interpreter of Confucianism. And remember here, just now we said Confucianism, the founder of Confucianism was Confucius. And here, the principal interpreter of Confucianism was Mencius. And Mencius was honored as the second sage. What does second sage mean? Second sage means that he was only after Confucius, the second one. And he was best known for his claim, human nature is good. In Chinese, that is 性善论. And also Mencius was very famous for his virtues and ethical cultivation and human nature philosophy. And he has attracted great interest in the Western philosophy because of his philosophical thoughts. And also, there was a very, very famous saying, 生于忧患，死于安乐. Survive in disaster and perish in comfort. And 得道多助，失道寡助. That is, a just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause fail little. And then let's look. The next page is about a story of Mencius. First, let's enjoy this picture. We can imagine who is this little boy and who is this lady. And we can imagine that this little boy was Mencius and this lady was Mencius' mother. And what happened to this picture? Mencius. Let's look at this story. Mencius' father died when Mencius was very young. And his mother, Zhang, raised her son alone. And they were very poor. At first, they lived by a cemetery, where the mother found her son imitating the paid mourners in funeral processions. And pay attention to here. At first, they lived by a cemetery. And the mother decided to move. And then the next place was near a market. And this time, the boy began to imitate the cries of merchants. And the mother was not happy. And she decided to move again. And the next place, they moved to a school. Next to a school. And this time, the mother was satisfied. Because inspired by the scholars of students, Mencius began to study. This time, his mother decided to remain, and Mencius at last became a scholar. So, from this story, we know this story is very, very famous. What is the story's name? That is 孟母三迁. What does this famous story tell us? What can we get? And this idiom, or we can say this famous expression or story, tells us the importance of finding the proper situation or proper environment for your child. And there is another man, the lost man, with eagle eyes. And he was Mozi. Mozi lived from 468 BC to 376 BC. He was named Modi, and he lived at the end of spring and autumn period and the beginning part of waning period. and he was the founder of Maoism. And he was a famous thinker, educator, scientist, militarist, and a social activist. Also, he was the founder of Maoism, and he was honored as an ancient sage. He had a famous work, the Mozi, and this work also had a profound influence in the preaching period.
That's all for today's topic, intellectual leaders in ancient Chinese philosophy.
That's all for my lecture. Thank you very much.